never forget the road trip that changed my life forever. My friends and I had planned it for months, eager to explore the Pacific Coast Highway and enjoy the sun, sand, and scenic views. We packed our bags, loaded up the car, and set off early one morning, feeling excited and carefree. Driving along, we saw the landscape change from busy towns to rolling hills to a rocky coastline. We made stops at charming villages and beaches where we enjoyed the views and sounds of the sea. However, I started to feel uneasy as the sun sank and vast shadows were created over the road. Little things were the first to happen. A weird sound coming from the back seat, an object that caught my attention briefly, and a sense of being seen. I dismissed it as just anxiety at first, but as the evening went on, the incidents became more frequent and severe. We stopped over to stretch our legs and refuel in an abandoned rest area. I saw a guy observing us from the shadows as I turned to leave the car. My friends turned to look at it after I pointed it out to them, but nobody was there. "Must have been your imagination," they joked. But I knew what I saw. The GPS guided us farther into the woods and along a narrow path as we continued to drive. The car became lost in darkness as the trees grew closer and taller. I experienced claustrophobia because I had been chained to the car and had no way out. The engine stuttered and died all of a sudden. We attempted to restart the car as we floated to the side of the road, but it remained stationary. "What's going on?" my friend asked, her voice becoming tense. "I don't know," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Let's just wait for a bit and see if it starts again." However, the silence grew heavier and thicker as we sat there. I felt like there were eyes staring right down at us. I made an effort to ignore the sensation, but it grew stronger instead. Then it was heard by us. A deep, sinister laugh that echoed through the forest, sent shivers down my spine, and I knew we had to get out of there fast. We were frozen in horror as the creature came out of the darkness, its twisted grin sending goosebumps through our veins. My thoughts accelerated, attempting to make sense of what I was witnessing, but the evil presence in front of us denied logic. Time stood icy in that moment of difficult fright. In the stillness of the night, I could hear the beating of my heartbeat in my ears. A smothering feeling of fear filled the air as the laughter became louder. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving us trembling and shaken but alive. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what had just happened. What was that?" At last, one of my friends grumbled, their voice trembling with terror. I answered, my own voice hardly audible above a whisper. "I don't know, but we must leave this place, right now." We climbed back into the car with shaky hands, and the engine started up again as if nothing had happened. I pressed the accelerator with all my might, wanting to go as far away from that strange stretch of road as possible, without saying anything. But the fear followed us everywhere we went as we traveled into the night. It was like a shadow. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that we were being observed and that the figure in the woods was still there, waiting to attack at the right moment by hiding in the shadows. The rest of the trip was a spin of anxiety and worry. Every sound seemed to promise danger, every shadow a potential threat. Too scared to turn around, we kept our eyes on the road ahead as we drove through the night. But regardless of how quickly or far we traveled, we were always filled with fear. It followed us like a wicked ghost, a never-ending reminder of the horrors we had experienced that terrible night. Our hearts beat with relief as we finally arrived at the safety of town, just as the first rays of dawn appeared on the horizon. However, I knew that the memory of that scary road journey would be with us forever, providing as a warning of the darkness that lies just beyond the border of the real world, even as we got out of our car and onto solid ground. Searching for a signal on our phones to send for help, we piled out of the car. However, there was nothing at all, just silence. The laughing got closer and louder as we stood there, paralyzed with fear. I sensed something surrounding and suffocating us. Afterwards, the darkness changed. From the shadows came a figure, its face twisted into a horrible smile. We attempted to run, but our legs were frozen. The ghostly figure started to approach, its eyes shining with spite. I opened my mouth to scream, but my voice became stuck in my throat. My friends were speechless and motionless due to sheer terror. The figure loomed over us, its hot breath on our skin. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, but it never came. The figure was gone when I opened my eyes once more. Even though the car wasn't running, we were able to signal a passing truck for assistance. The horror didn't go away as we drove away from that location. I was aware that we had come across a terrible entity that hid in the shadows, patiently waiting for its next prey. And I knew that I would never forget that road trip, that feeling of being trapped and helpless in the face of horror. As we drove further away from the woods, the silence in the car was palpable. No one spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, even though we were safe now. We stopped at a motel for the night, trying to rest and process what had happened. But I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of the figure in the woods. Who was it? What did it want? And why did it let us go? The questions swirled in my head, taunting me. I knew I would never find the answers, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that our encounter was far from over. As we continued our journey the next day, I noticed strange things. A car following us, always keeping a distance. A figure lurking in the shadows, watching us. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but deep down, I knew it was more. We were being stalked, hunted by something that wouldn't rest until it claimed us. And I knew that we would never be safe again.
We were driving along, having a great time laughing and joking around, with the excitement of adventure filling our veins. As we raced down the highway, our car's headlights shining through the darkness like a beacon of freedom, the night was overflowing with possibilities. Happy music erupted from the radio, and we all joined in on the chorus of laughs and conversation. We were fascinated with the freedom of the open road and free at the same time. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, there she was, a woman shadowed by our headlights, standing by herself in the center of the road. She was dressed in a bridal gown, the strong contrast between the white dress and the night's blackness. I applied full force to the brakes, causing the tires to screech in anger as the car skidded to a stop mere feet from her. I looked at her in shock, my heart racing in the middle of my chest as my brain tried to process what I was seeing. "Please, please let me in," she begged, her voice just barely heard over the engine's noise. "I'm all alone out here." My friends were rushing to get her in before I could react to her words, which made me cringe. Their feeling of adventure was amplified by the idea of a strange woman in trouble, and their judgment was impaired due to alcohol and arrogance. I hesitated, uneasiness gnawing at the corners of my thoughts. Her white color, blank expression, and seemingly sudden appearance in the midst of nowhere all gave off an unpleasant vibe. However, my buddies had already thrown open the car door and welcomed her with excited smiles and wide supports before I could even express my worries. She got into the back seat, her presence giving the car a very cold feeling that made my skin tingle. The tension in the car increased as we drove further down the road. The woman sat in silence, her eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I tried to start a conversation to break the stifling stillness that was hanging over us like a cloak, but my attempts ended with silence. She appeared to be caught in a supernatural trance, her thoughts a million miles from reality. I was about to lose my mind when she spoke, her voice shrill and low enough to send shivers down my spine. She shouted, "Turn back," her words resonating through the car like a death trumpet. "Turn back before it's too late." Her words sent me a shockwave of anxiety, but before I could react, the car came to a sudden stop, the engine coughing and dying as though it was turned out by some invisible power. I tried desperately to start the engine, but it was useless, and panic shot through me. We were abandoned in the midst of nowhere, helpless against whatever evil thing had captured us. As soon as I thought things couldn't get any worse, she appeared in front of me. Her wedding gown was flowing in the breeze, and she had a supernatural glow in her eyes. Whispering, "Leave," her voice became a melancholic loop in the darkness. "Leave before it's too late." But it was too late now. The car doors slammed loudly and closed themselves, like if they were waiting for us, sealing us inside with the ghostly hitchhiker. I let out a scream, but the crushing quiet that enveloped us like a weighty blanket blocked my voice. Picking up a hitchhiker in the middle of the night sealed our destiny and left us at the mercy of powers beyond our comprehension. And I realized that we would never be able to get away the horror that was waiting for us on that lonely road as the pitch black closed in around us. We were meant to live with wandering spirits on the highways of forever, continually haunted by the memory of the creepy hitchhiker. However, just when it looked hopeless, a lone human standing at the edge of the road with their hand extended in a silent promise of rescue gave rise to a tiny glimmer of light on the far horizon. I felt a wave of warmth course through my body as they created me from the car particles, and I did so with a rush of hope when I stretched out and grabbed their hand. My friends looked tired and pale, yet they were filled with the same glimmer of hope that I felt. With the confidence of someone who knew the path, the figure led us off the road and through the darkness. They told us their story as we walked. It was one of love and sorrow, about a bride who was left waiting for a man who would never show up at the wedding ceremony. But the figure turned to face us, serious, as we reached the border of the trees. They cried, their voices trembling with sorrow, "You have to leave now. There are things in these woods that no human being should ever see." They then disappeared into the night, leaving us by ourselves at the forest's edges with nothing more than our memories of the horrors we had seen. We walked through the forest in a fog, our heads spinning after what we had just been through. But we came out of the jungle, damaged and broken but alive. That night was too painful a memory for us to discuss. However, as the years went by and life progressed, I frequently discovered that I was haunted by visions of the creepy hitchhiker, their ghostly figure permanently scarred into my memory. One thing is for sure, yet, some mysteries are better left unsolved, some roads better left untraveled.
As our car made its way through the twisting road, further into the middle of the forest, the sun sank below the horizon, creating lengthy shadows across the tree's ground. We were traveling in search of excitement and a break from the routine of everyday life. We had no idea that our journey would take us right into the very core of the darkness. With their branches spreading like skeletal fingers into the sky, the trees towered above the road on both sides. The smell of dirt and pine filled the air, and an air of dread covered us like a thick veil. The air became more tense as the darkness settled in around us. My friends looked at one another nervously, their faces dull and strained in the car's low light. The whispers of something evil hiding in the trees had been told to us, but we had dismissed them as just tales told around the campfire. But those stories seemed all too real now, as night closed in around us. I got goosebumps as I felt eyes, invisible and incomprehensible, staring us from the darkness. Susan said, "We should never have come here," her voice almost heard above the sound of the rustling leaves. "There's something wrong with this place." My heart beating like a drum of fear in my chest, I nodded silently in mutual agreement. Still, none of us dared to propose going back, even in spite of our mounting discomfort. We stayed put because of a sick interest that pushed us to look into the meaning behind the whispers that appeared to remain in these forests. The trees surrounded us as we went farther into the pitch black, their branches creating an overhanging dome that hid the moonlight. Every crack of a branch and every leaf rustle sent us into a panic. The atmosphere grew tense, and then we heard it, the sound of evil whispers echoing through the night. When I realized that the voices were coming from all around us, like if the trees themselves were communicating to us, my blood ran cold. Someone cried out, "Run," in a terrified and desperate voice. "We have to get out of here." However, before we had a chance to move, a dense fog came in, wrapping the car in its cold grip and blocking out our surroundings. I was overcome with panic as I realized we were hopelessly lost in a sea of whirling mist, absolutely lost. We stumbled aimlessly through the mist, trying to find a way out. The whispers, however, followed us wherever we went, becoming louder and more forceful with every step we took. And then, just when I feared we would be lost forever in the woods, we came across an opening. A little area of land illuminated by the moonlight, surrounded by tall trees that appeared to be bending dangerously toward us. A tall, shadowy figure in dirty clothes that floated over them like a cloak of darkness stood in the center of the area. A chill ran down my spine as their eyes sparkled with an unearthly light, watching us approach. Their presence filled the empty space with an aura of evil. The figure said, "We've been waiting for you," in a voice similar to wind rustling leaves. "You have violated upon our property, and now you must pay the price." The figure called an army of twisted, horrible creatures with a wave of their hand. They appeared out of the shadows like nightmare specters, with eyes glowing with hate and desire. My friends and I stood transfixed in dread as the creatures closed in around us. However, just when it appeared that there was no hope left, a strong, powerful voice that seemed to break through the haze like a beacon of light in the night suddenly resounded through the shadows. The voice said, "Leave them be," and the creatures jerked away as though hit by an invisible force. "They are under my protection." The creatures then disappeared into the night with the same rapidity as they had appeared, leaving only the sound of their receding footsteps and the wind whispering through the trees. The figure turned to face us, regret mixed with sympathy in their eyes. "You are safe now," they said in a soothing, gentle voice. "But keep in mind that there are far older and more powerful forces at work in this planet than you may realize. Avoid getting involved in matters you don't understand because the consequences could be disastrous." The ghostly figure then vanished into the night, leaving my buddies and I in the quiet once more on our own. After gathering everything we owned, we returned to our homes, our terrifying experience forever etched in our memories. We would never discuss the events that night in those whispering woods again, but the memory of it would follow us for the rest of our lives as a warning of the perils that lie in store for the careless and the innocent. The incidents of the evening weighed heavily on us as we trudged back to our car. The once vibrant woodland now seemed like a maze of horrors, with every shade concealing terrifying secrets. As we drove away, the only sounds we could hear were the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. With our thoughts still spinning from what we had seen, none of us dared to speak. There was strained silence for hours until finally the woods thinned and the first rays of dawn broke through the cover of night. We came out of the forest, broken and tired, yet we were still here. I had the unshakable impression that we had just about escaped something much worse than death as we drove away from that damned location. I would always be reminded of the darkness that lies on the border of reality by the recollection of those whispering woods, which would follow me for the rest of my life. Even if we didn't talk about that night again, the fear and survival that united us will always be a silent reminder of the horrors we had experienced and the strength we had found in one another. Thus, Take notice of my advice if you're ever enticed to the calm beauty of the woods. Once you step within, you might never find your way out again, and the whispering forests hide mysteries better left undiscovered.